About a year and a half ago, when I was around 20 years old, I had a job at a local supermarket. I worked there as a cashier, ringing up groceries and chatting with customers. I went to school during the day, so I worked in the evenings on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Most of the time, I had to close up the store. That was okay with me, because the supermarket's parking lot was well lit, and there were other stores and a gas station nearby. It was a comfortable place to be, even at night. One evening, a guy who I'll call Jack came to my register. He was short, kind of chubby, and seemed to be around my age. He suddenly asked me if I had a boyfriend. I told him I did, which was true. Then another guy, taller and thinner, who I'll name Bob, came over. I quickly understood that Bob was the one who liked me, not Jack. Bob started joking with me, saying stuff like I must be joking about the boyfriend. I just laughed it off, thinking he was just being playful, like some boys are. I didn't think much of it. The next day, Bob came back. I guessed he probably lived nearby because a lot of people from the neighboring houses shopped at our store. This time, he was again trying to chat with me, not believing I had a boyfriend. At this point, I was wondering why he was so keen on talking to me. I always wore a face mask at work because of the health rules, so he never really saw all of my face, but I just brushed it off. By the third time Bob came around, I started feeling uncomfortable. I decided that if he approached me again, I'd ignore him or ask him to go away. One evening, my boss asked me to clean some shopping carts. So I put in my earphones and began cleaning. It was getting late and I was hoping I wouldn't see Bob, but as luck would have it, he came into the store again. I tried to act busy, hoping he wouldn't see me, but he did. He seemed a bit annoyed and asked why I was avoiding him. I told him I wasn't interested, but he didn't seem to get the message. Eventually, he left. Later, I had to go outside to collect more carts. It was getting darker and I felt nervous, so I called my mom. As I was on the phone with her, guess who showed up? Bob, with Jack, his friend. I tried to tell him I was busy talking to my mom. He said something I don't quite remember, but it made me feel uneasy. When I got back inside, I mentioned Bob to anyone who'd listen, including a security guard named Mike. Mike told me he saw Bob and Jack outside earlier, and he noticed Bob showing off something that looked like a gun. But Mike thought Bob was just trying to look tough. Another coworker told me Bob often bothered girls, but she thought the gun was probably fake. Still, fake or not, I was scared. I hid in a small room and called my mom again, crying. She was really worried and said she was coming over. I didn't want to leave my coworker alone, so I finished my shift. Mike kept an eye on me as I left, and I saw my mom, sister, and dad all waiting for me. My dad noticed a black car parked nearby, which drove off shortly after he arrived. I think that car was Bob's, waiting for me. I told my boss I wouldn't come in for a few days because I was scared. Eventually, I went back because school was getting busier. But I always wonder what might have happened if I hadn't told my parents about Bob. I'm just glad I never had to find out. One late evening, after a long day at my job, I headed to the nearby supermarket to pick up some stuff. I'd gotten used to shopping at this hour. The reason? The store, which was open pretty late, was mostly empty, which meant no long lines or crowded aisles. This made it really easy and quick for me to grab whatever I needed and head back home. This one particular evening, I was strolling through the aisles, and when I was in the section with all the fizzy drinks, something unusual caught my eye. Right there, at the very bottom shelf, was a single photograph. Now, you'd wonder what a photo was doing in a supermarket, right? Especially in the drinks section. I was curious, so I bent down and picked it up. The photograph showed a house, a pretty regular one, nothing special about it. But as I looked closer, a weird feeling crept up. The house looked familiar, very familiar. I stared hard, trying to place where I'd seen it, and then it struck me. The house in the photo looked almost exactly like my own house. The same windows, the same door, the same little garden at the front. Feeling a bit weirded out, I placed the photograph back where I found it. Maybe someone dropped it, or maybe it was just a crazy coincidence. I tried to brush it off, finish my shopping, and then headed home. But a few days later, as I was stepping outside my house, ready to head to work, something on the ground caught my eye. There, right in front of my doorstep, was another photograph. And this time, I had a feeling it wasn't just a coincidence. I bent down to pick up the photograph in front of my house. It looked just like the one I had seen at the supermarket. It showed my home, the very same windows and door, and the familiar garden. I was sure I'd left it at the store the other day. Now, seeing it again made me feel uneasy. With the photo in hand, I got into my car and headed to work. Later that evening, after wrapping up my work, I once again found myself at the supermarket. I needed some easy food for dinner, so I grabbed a couple of frozen pizzas and added some veggies to my cart. As I made my way towards the section with the pasta, I glanced around the store. It was pretty quiet since it was nearing 11 p.m. As I was pushing my cart from one aisle to another, something odd caught my attention. A bit far off, maybe about 40 feet or so, there was a guy with a camera. He was pointing it directly at me. The camera hid most of his face, but I could make out his black jacket. I was startled, and our eyes met for just a split second before he quickly hid behind the next aisle. A chill ran down my spine. Was this the guy who took that picture of my house? Why was he taking pictures of me? I decided I needed to find out, so I went over to the aisle where I had seen him, but to my surprise, he was gone. I spent a good while walking up and down the supermarket aisles, searching for the camera guy, but it was like he had vanished into thin air. I never saw him again. Finishing up my shopping, I went home with more questions than answers. Days turned into weeks, and I never found any more pictures, nor did I encounter the man with the camera. Even now, I often think about who he was and what he wanted. Around 2 decades ago, I used to stay in a simple neighborhood which was a bit far from a big city in the U.S. There was this grocery store that I always went to. I think I went there maybe once or twice every week because I needed to buy stuff for my home. One day when I was picking some stuff near where they make sandwiches, I noticed this man. He was wearing clothes that made him look like he cut meat or something, and guess what? He was looking right at me. He kept looking and didn't even blink. It was so strange. He was a tall and big man with a black mustache. He looked like he could be my dad's age, maybe around 50 years or more. When someone looks at you like that, it feels weird, right? So I smiled at him a bit and even waved with my hand, hoping he would stop looking, but nope, he didn't smile back or wave, he just kept staring. I thought, okay, maybe he's just having a bad day, and I moved to another section of the store to buy other things. But you won't believe what happened next. Every time I came to that store, which was a lot because it was my favorite place to shop, I would see him. And guess what? He would always be looking at me. It was starting to get really scary and strange. About this man, I had never seen him in the store before. Maybe he was a new worker or something, but his presence was so strange and mysterious. One particular day, I was at the store, trying to find my favorite breakfast cereal. As I was searching for it, I noticed a gap on the shelves. And guess what? Through that small gap, I could see the very next aisle. My heart almost skipped a beat when I saw him, that man with the mustache peeking at me from the other side. His eyes were locked onto mine, just like all the other times. This really scared me, so I quickly stepped back and decided to leave that section. I thought to myself, enough is enough. I wanted to get to the bottom of this. Why was he always staring at me? So I quickly walked up to the front, searching for the store manager. When I found him, I asked him about the man. I said, "Who is that tall guy with a dark mustache who works near the sandwiches and meats?" The manager looked puzzled. "We don't have any worker with a mustache," he replied. I was confused and described the man in detail, making sure the manager got a clear picture of who I was talking about. But the manager was adamant. He said that no one fitting that description worked at the store. To make sure, we both went around the entire store, checking each aisle and section, trying to find the mysterious man. But he was gone. It was like he had vanished into thin air. This freaked me out so much that I made a decision right then and there. I promised myself that I would never, ever go back to that store again, and I kept that promise. When I was a teenager, I had a job at a small grocery shop. During that time, I was super busy with both school and my job. I worked mostly in the fruits and veggies area, filling up the shelves. But if they needed me to do something else, I'd help out with that too. Sometimes I'd sneak to the back of the shop when things got a bit slow, just to chill and check my phone. I knew it wasn't the best thing to do, but hey, I was young. So on a not-so-busy day, I decided to take one of these little breaks. I went into the store's back room and pulled out my phone to pass some time, but just to be safe, I kept my walkie-talkie on, in case someone called for me. Not many people came into the back room, so I felt it was a good spot. But after about 10 minutes or so, I heard the back room doors swing open. My first thought? Maybe it's my manager or one of my friends from work. I didn't want to get caught, so I quickly went into the little bathroom in the back and gently closed the door. I listened closely. Footsteps. More than one person. They got nearer but didn't seem to notice me. They talked among themselves, but it wasn't any voice I knew. Who were these people? I tried to listen to their chat, but I couldn't catch everything they said. I heard bits and pieces. Then one phrase caught my attention, something about a car parked at the back. As I kept listening, it became pretty clear that these folks were up to no good. They were robbing our store. Our shop didn't have the best security system because it was an old, small place. I huddled in the bathroom, hoping they'd make a quick exit, but they just kept on chattering. Finally, it seemed like they were getting ready to leave. Right then, my walkie-talkie beeped. Someone was trying to reach me. I panicked and turned it off, but the damage was done. One of the guys asked about that noise. They started walking toward the bathroom, and one of them banged on the door twice, real loud. The guy inside the bathroom, he shouted at me and demanded to know who I was. I didn't say a word. Then he ordered me in a really tough voice to come out. I had to come up with something quick. So I blurted out that I'd already called the cops and they were on their way. Surprisingly, it seemed to work. The robbers didn't say anything else, and I heard them shuffling away. I stayed in that bathroom for a while, scared out of my wits, and then turned my walkie-talkie back on. My boss had been trying to reach me for ages. I finally stepped out into the store, and lo and behold, the police were there, thanks to someone else who'd actually called them.